Welcome back to another deep dive. Today, we are doing something a little different. Usually, we're looking at broad market trends, high-level concepts. But today, we are going squarely into the weeds.
We are.
If you're prepping for the NMLS SAFE exam, you should consider this your survival guide for one of the absolute trickiest sections of the test: risk, default, and foreclosure.
Oh, it's definitely one of the denser sections. But honestly, it's also where the rubber meets the road. I mean, this is the reality of what happens when a loan goes wrong.
Exactly. And we're focusing on a primary source document, Principles of Loan Modification and Loss Mitigation.
Right.
Now, I'll be honest, when I first saw that title, I thought, okay, this is going to be about filing paperwork in a basement somewhere, but it's actually about crisis management.
That is a great way to put it. It is crisis management, but it's, highly regulated crisis management. It's not the Wild West. There's a script.
So the mission for this deep dive is really to decode the regulator's mindset. We need to understand not just what a loan modification is, but why it exists. Because on the exam, they won't ask how you feel about a defaulting borrower.
No. They're going to ask you what you are legally allowed to do about it.
Precisely. You have to strip away the emotion and just look at the mechanism.
It's all about structure.
And before we get into the mechanics of, saving a loan or not saving it, we do have a quick housekeeping note.
Yep.
If you are enjoying these NMLS Safe Study podcasts, please subscribe, like, and comment. Tell which topic you want us to cover next, or tell us which state you are tuned in from. This supports and helps grow the channel while also allowing us to reach more learners.
It really does help us figure out what to focus on for you.
All right, let's set the scene. The source material talks about this concept of loss mitigation. To me, that sounds a little like corporate speak for losing less money.
I mean, it is, but the visual is a pressure cooker. You have a borrower who has stopped paying or is about to. The loss mitigation department is basically the emergency room of the mortgage lender. The loan is bleeding out. The lender is looking at a foreclosure, which is incredibly expensive.
And the borrower is looking at, well, potential homelessness.
Right. So loss mitigation is the umbrella term for every tool the industry has to stop that train wreck from happening.
So it's not just about being nice to the borrower. It's about the lender protecting their own ass.
That is the crucial context you need for the test. It's risk management. Foreclosure is a failure of the investment. A modification is an attempt to salvage it.
Got it. So if you go into the exam thinking this is about charity,
you will miss the nuance every time.
Let's drill down into the definition then. The text says a loan modification is a permanent change to one or more terms of a mortgage loan. Why is that word permanent so important?
Because in the mortgage world, we have a lot of temporary band-aids. A modification is reconstructive surgery.
Yeah.
It is a permanent alteration of the legal contract. You're effectively ripping up the old note and writing a new one.
So if a lender agrees to this, they lower a rate or stretch out the payments, are they just doing it out of the goodness of their hearts? I feel like there's a trap there.
That is a massive trap. If you see an answer choice that implies the lender is doing it because they feel for the borrower, it's wrong.
It's just wrong.
It's a regulated tool. The goal is to prevent unnecessary foreclosure.
Define unnecessary. When is a foreclosure ever necessary?
A foreclosure is necessary when the borrower has no money and no prospect of getting any money. There's no other option.
Right.
But if a borrower has income, just not enough income for the current payment, then foreclosing might be unnecessary because a modification could, fix the math.
So the regulator's looking for a win-win, but a mathematical one, not an emotional one.
Exactly. The question is, can we turn this non-performing loan, this liability, back into a performing asset? That's the whole game.
This brings us to what the source calls the Great Divide. And this seems to be where a lot of test takers get tripped up. Modification versus forbearance.
Yes. They sound the same to a regular person, like they both just mean help.
Yeah, exactly.
But they are completely different animals in the eyes of the law, and confusing them is the easiest way to fail a scenario question.
So break it down. How do I distinguish them in a scenario?
It really just comes down to the nature of the hardship. Is it temporary or is it long-term?
Okay.
Forbearance and repayment plans, those are for temporary problems. Short-term fixes.
Give me a concrete example.
Okay. Imagine you're a sales rep.
Okay.
All commission. You break your leg, can't work for 3 months, your income drops.
Right.
But the doctor says in 90 days, you're back on the road, your income returns. That is a temporary hardship. You don't need a new loan, you just need a pause button.
You just need him to say, okay, skip these 3 payments, catch us up later.
Exactly. That's forbearance. The original contract stays intact. But now, different scenario. Imagine your spouse, who brought in half the income, passes away. That income is gone. It is never coming back. You can't catch up later because your ability to pay has fundamentally shrunk. Forever.
That's a permanent hardship. You can't go back to the old way because it doesn't exist anymore.
Correct. The old loan terms are now mathematically impossible. That is the threshold for a loan modification.
So if I see an exam question where a guy gets laid off, but he just signed an offer for a new job starting next month.
Do not pick loan modification. That's a forbearance scenario. Modification is for when the borrower cannot reasonably return to their original terms.
Surgery versus a Band-Aid. I like that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the surgery itself. When does this actually happen? Do you have to wait until the sheriff is knocking on the door?
Definitely not. In fact, if you wait that long, it's often too late. It usually starts after delinquency or when imminent default is on the horizon.
Imminent default.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting term. That means they haven't actually missed a payment yet.
Right. It's the borrower calling and saying, look, I paid this month, but my plant is closing next week. I won't be able to pay next month. Ah, so it's proactive.
Regulators expect that. They want early intervention. You don't wait for the car to crash to start fixing the brakes.
Okay, so what levers are we actually pulling? What changes?
There's a sort of a hierarchy or waterfall they usually follow. The most common lever is the interest rate.
Just reduce it.
Yep. Reduce the rate to lower the payment. Easiest math.
Simple enough. What else?
Term extension.
Yeah.
This is a big one. Let's say you have 20 years left on your 30-year mortgage. We might just rip that up and give you a new 40-year mortgage.
So you're spreading the same balance over a much longer timeline.
Exactly. It dilutes the monthly payment. It makes the monthly nut smaller.
There's another term in here, capitalization of arrears. Sounds painful. What is that?
It can be. Suppose you've missed 6 months of payments. You owe, say, $12,000. You don't just have that lying around.
Right.
So the lender takes that $12,000 and just adds it to your principal balance.
So now my loan is actually bigger than it was before. Precisely. You're now current again, but your total debt has grown. And here's the kicker. You're now paying interest on that $12,000, which already included interest you missed.
Wow. So you're paying interest on interest.
You are. But if the alternative is losing the house...
You take the deal. Okay, for the exam, am I going to have to calculate this stuff?
Thankfully, no, it's not a math test in that sense. It tests the purpose. You need to understand why you're pulling these levers. The goal is to get to a sustainable monthly payment.
That leads right into the cost of relief idea. Because this isn't free money. There's a consumer protection angle here.
This is huge, and it's counterintuitive. We think lower monthly payment equals cheaper loan.
Right. I'm paying $500 less a month. I feel like I'm saving money.
Short-term cash flow, yes. But think about that term extension. If I stretch your loan from 20 years to 40 years...
You're paying interest for an extra 20 years.
Exactly. The total interest paid over the life of the loan can skyrocket.
That's a massive trade-off. You're kicking the can down the road, but the can gets heavier every time you kick it.
Correct. And the regulator insists, this is a strict rule, the borrower must be informed of this. You can't just dazzle them with the low monthly payment.
So an exam question about disclosures would probably point to total cost of credit or something like that.
Yes. The borrower has to know what they're getting into. They are buying affordability today at the cost of wealth tomorrow.
And that ties into fairness, too. You can't just flip a coin to decide who gets one, right?
No gut feelings.
Huh.
You might see a question where a loan officer has a good feeling about someone and pushes a mod through even though the numbers are shaky.
Yeah.
That's a violation.
Because it's arbitrary.
Exactly. The process has to be consistent. Document the hardship, verify the income. If borrower A and borrower B have the same financial picture, they have to get the same result.
Structured, documented, consistent. Got it. Now, what about this trial period? Why do you need a test run?
Because the lender has been burned once already.
Yeah.
You know, the borrower defaulted, trust is low. So the trial period plan, or TPP, is usually a 3-month test drive. The lender says, okay, prove you can make this new lower payment.
And if they do?
Then the modification becomes permanent. But this brings us to probably the most critical concept in this whole area, dual tracking.
That sounds like a train collision.
It feels like one for the borrower. Dual tracking is when the servicer is moving forward with foreclosure, scheduling the auction, filing motions. At the same time, they're working with the borrower on a modification.
So the left hand is offering you a deal, and the right hand is taking your house.
That's a very graphic, but yeah, pretty accurate description. Regulators hate this.
So what's the rule? If I'm in a trial plan, can they foreclose?
Generally, no. If a complete loss-mit application is pending, or if the borrower is making their trial payments, the foreclosure process has to stop.
The train stops on the tracks.
It has to. You cannot sell the house out from under someone who is doing exactly what you asked them to do. For the exam, remember the word coordination. The dual tracking ban is about stopping that double dealing.
Let's pivot to scenario logic. On the test, how do I spot the Goldilocks candidate for a modification?
You're looking for two things. First, a verifiable long-term hardship. They have to be in real trouble.
Check. Hardship is key.
But second, and this is what people miss, they must have sufficient income to support the reduced payment.
Ah, that's the Goldilocks zone. Broke enough to need help, but rich enough to pay something.
Exactly. If a borrower has zero income, zero prospects, a modification is strictly the wrong answer.
Because you can't modify zero.
30% of zero is still zero. In that case, the correct path is an exit strategy, a short sale, a deed in lieu of foreclosure.
That's a great way to think about it. Retention options versus exit options. Modification is retention.
Perfect. That's the logic tree you need.
And what about credit? It's got to hurt your credit. Right?
It's definitely a bruise. It'll show up on your credit report. It hurts the score. But compared to a full foreclosure judgment, it's a scratch compared to a broken bone.
Again, loss mitigation. Harm reduction, not perfection.
That is the whole theme. We're just trying to minimize the blast radius.
So let's zoom out. What's the big picture takeaway for the exam?
The narrative is financial recycling.
Ooh, explain that.
The mortgage market relies on performing assets, right? Loans that pay interest. When a loan defaults, it becomes junk. Toxic waste on the balance sheet.
Okay.
A loan modification is the processing plant that takes that toxic waste and recycles it back into a useful product. It turns a bad debt back into a performing asset.
And that protects the whole system.
It protects the system from collapse, and it protects communities from vacant, boarded-up homes.
But it requires strict rules to work.
Yes. You have to verify that the recycling will actually work, that the borrower can pay. It requires fairness, and it requires transparency about the cost.
So when you're taking the exam, don't just memorize definitions. Ask, is this borrower a candidate for recycling? Or do we need to scrap the car?
That is the perfect mindset. If you view it through that lens, the right answers usually just jump off the page.
To recap then, loan modification is a permanent change for a permanent hardship. It requires income. It requires a trial. And it strictly prohibits dual tracking.
You nailed it. If you keep those pillars in mind, permanent hardship, sustainability, and consumer protection, you'll breeze through this section.
Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. We hope this helps you decode those scenario questions and gives you a bit more confidence.
It's one of the most human parts of the industry, really. Disguised as math, but it's about people keeping their homes.
A great way to put it. And before we sign off, here's your final reminder. If you are enjoying these NMLS Safe Study podcasts, please subscribe, like, and comment. Tell which topic you want us to cover next, or tell us which state you are tuned in from. This supports and helps grow the channel while also allowing us to reach more learners.
Good luck with your prep. You've got this.
Keep diving deep, and we'll catch you on the next one.